Hello, everyone. Welcome back. What is it? It's Wednesday and it's still sunny in Levenshulme. Here's Socks, who's trying to get settled as I have a cup of tea after lunch. I'm going to go through some of the things, some of the books that have arrived in the house recently. I've acquired some books by various means, and I shouldn't have, but some of them are presents rather. I have been putting loads of my own books outside on the little library, and there are boxes and boxes and crates of books outside, along with lots of others from other people donated. Friends moved away from the street, really sadly, this week, and well, happily for them, they're going somewhere lovely. But they've donated lots of books as well, so the library outside is overflowing, and I hope people are taking them away. Socks, I've arranged this viewpoint so people can see you. There, is that better? They can see you, but they probably can't hear me. Okay, I've got about 50 pages of this to go. One Summer in Italy. I'm determined to finish this Sue Moorcroft novel. I quite like it, but the people are a bit inclined to fly into these tempers and get quite demonstrative about their feelings and demand that everybody listen and runs to them. There's a lot of decorous passive aggression going on, which I've never found entertaining or intriguing as a character trait, I must say. So it's kind of spoiling it slightly for me. But we'll be finished that soon, and moving on. There, is that a bit of... There he is. Now, books that have arrived. Let's see, I'll start with... First of all, my friend Rosie had a birthday, and I sent her a book parcel that I hoped would get there in time. And on her birthday, a parcel to me arrived. She's sending me presents on her birthday, which is very kind of her. She's a great reader, Rosie, and she has great taste. And our taste often is very similar in comedies, romantic comedies, and thrillers. So this is something I don't know, The Intruders by Louise Jensen, which is a name that rings a bell. I think I read her years ago. Can't remember. Anyway, this is... It looks like a dark and spooky one. A manor house available rent-free to house sitters is an offer too good to miss for Cass and James. Although it had been abandoned for almost 30 years after an incident left almost all of the inhabitants dead, it's an amazing chance for them to rebuild their future. Shortly after moving in, things take a sinister turn. Objects disappear and turn up in odd places. The clock always stops at the same time. The house is strangely oppressive, and sometimes it feels like Cass and James are not alone. Blah, 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 dark reputation, blah, blah, blah. No reason for history to repeat itself, is there? Kind of Tom's Midnight Garden and Rebecca I'm getting from this, which is... Why didn't I think of that combination? That sounds fun. Harper. Just last year, 2024. And this, I know, is quite new because we were with her when she bought it in that nice new bookshop in town, House of Books and Friends, the one with a quite nice cafe. This is called The Last Bookstore on Earth by Lily Braun Arnold. Seems like a kind of post-apocalyptic, cozy bookstore. Oh, the sprayed edges. That's what they all talk about, isn't it, on BookTube? In the old days, when you bought, especially science fiction and horror from the States, they would be sprayed edges and they'd be yellow. But I don't think it was on purpose. I think they were just really sun-faded, old stock. This is Penguin, this year came out, I think. The world is about to end again. It's been a year since a devastating storm ripped Liz's world apart, haunted by memories of those she couldn't save. Liz holes up in the one place she felt safe before her world fell away, the bookstore where she used to work. Now she spends her days trading books for supplies and collecting stories from the remaining survivors who pass by, until she learns that another earth-shattering storm is coming and everything changes. Enter Maeve, a spiky out-of-town... I'd love to write a book with somebody called Maeve. Maybe I'll do that. Remind me that's the character. That's the name I want for a character. A spiky out-of-towner who breaks into the bookstore one night looking for shelter. Soon the pair find themselves fighting for their lives and asking themselves the one big question: can love save them all? Yep, bit of post-apocalyptic carry-on would be nice. That thing about all the stories in the world and the surviving stories of the world remind me of the book that I've got coming out in September from Penguin, again, written with Steve Cole, our Doctor Who hardback of short stories written between us. And it's called 1001 Nights in Time and Space. And they're interlinked short stories. I'm not giving anything away. It says this on Amazon and it says it on the Penguin site. But it's set at the end of last season of Doctor Who, when there's nothing left of the universe, when Sutekh has destroyed everything and turned everything and everybody to sand. And there's just one old man in a wagon moving across a glittering desert of jewels and sand. And he's got, it used to be a library wagon, it used to be a mobile library. And his company is just an old cart horse called Chuzzlewit and a raven called Evermore, who flaps around his head and says sarcastic things. And there's one book left aboard the library. And the whole of our book is set around the idea of this old man stopping his cart next to a fire which has been lit by a young man who seems to the reader slightly familiar. And they all sit round the campfire and they tell old stories. And gradually, through, is it one night or 1001 nights, they tell the whole story of the universe and bring it back to life by telling tales from unusual points of view. And that's this whole book that we've been working on. Last year mostly, this year kind of putting it all together, and it'll be out in September. But it's a similar idea that at the end of the universe, when everything seems ruined, what's left is a pile of stories and the storytellers who put the world back together. Anyway, that's what that book's about, so I hope you'll go off and read it, buy it and read it. So those are my books from Rosie, along with a nice card on her birthday. Now for myself, I got onto eBay. I had because it was the anniversary of Paul O'Grady's death, and they mentioned there was a tiny video that he'd recorded just before he died about one of his kids' books getting an award. And I thought, I never read those. At the time, I kind of put them down to, it's more celebrity kids' books, which I should have trusted Paul O'Grady more, really, because he was a wonderful writer of his own memoirs. He wrote 2 kids' books, Eddie Albert and The Amazing Animal Gang was the first one. And it does sound lovely. It sounds a bit like Dodie Smith or Mary Norton, that kind of kids' book. A cargo barge caught Eddie's attention as it slipped silently out from under the bridge. The canvas had come loose, and from underneath appeared a pair of very large eyes. Eddie blinked hard. What on earth? It was the face of a small orangutan, and around its neck was a collar with a chain attached. Eddie stared in disbelief. As the barge sailed past, he was just in time to see the orangutan look up at him and mouth the word, help. I didn't know it was about orangutans, which I've been reading about. You're going to knock that camera over, Socks. I've been reading about recently for a project. So that's a nice bit of primate serendipity. I feel horrible every time I think about orangutans and what has been done to them and their environment. Yeah, I just do. And I'm glad that this is going to be about them and their plight and drawing attention to it. Okay, He's twizzling round and he can't get comfy, can you? Oh, is that better? Can we see you there? Look. There. This is me fiddling with the tripod. You see how sunny it is. You can also see my cardboard boxes of journals, and the two shelves underneath are all journals as well. Those are the last 10 years, and the cardboard boxes are decades before. They don't include many of the drawings. They're mostly just journals and diaries up there. Now, what else? I hiked out of the book boxes at the front of the house Eragon by Christopher Paolini. I've got this urge to read some epic fantasy, and this is something I think I read at the time actually, but I didn't read the rest of the series, so I'm going to go back to it. I want something with some dragons this summer, I think. And then, what was it, Monday night, I came back home to a parcel on the doorstep, an eBay parcel that was a present to myself. We'd been out on Monday night, a whole gang of us from our book club, to the Royal Exchange Theatre in town to see Abigail's Party in Revival with Kim Marsh as Beverly. It was a wonderful production. The whole thing was really enjoyable. The Mike Leigh original TV play is one of my favourite bits of TV ever. And I know it off by heart just about from almost annual viewings of that play. And yeah, that was a good night out on Monday. And I came back, and on the doorstep was a box of books. I'm keeping them in this suitcase. I've got this tiny suitcase that is really for vintage photos. I bought a batch of old photos in this once, and I love it. And when I was tidying up this morning, I found it empty, and it was a resting place for these scholastic books. That's what this pile is. It was a batch of scholastic paperbacks from the 70s. Now, school book clubs were a huge deal, I know, for lots of people, and they were for us in Newton Aycliffe, in Wood and Burn Infants and Juniors. Every month you would get a folded catalogue, just a folded piece of A4 paper with maybe 30 choices, 20 or 30 choices, and you ticked which one you wanted, and they'd be about 50 to 75p, I think. It was only later, as I got towards the end of the 70s and I was 9 and 10, the books went over the price, over £1, I think, and they were usually ones that were tying into movies like Star Wars. Mostly they looked like this. They were kind of cheaply made editions that smelled wonderful. That kind of old yellowy paper. Often American, not always, but wherever they came from, they all look the same. I haven't got many of my own from the time left. I've got a Basil Brush one that I've had all my life. It's not to hand, I can't show you that just now. And I had a lovely book about sharks, a non-fiction book about sharks, where they told you how they lived and how they never stopped moving and how their skin was like was rough and would cut you if you rubbed them up the wrong way. Anyway, I bought this batch of mostly scholastic books, and they're all animal books. The Reindeer's Slippers by Barbara Willard. Every one of these sounds moving and touching, actually. Wild Boy by Thomas Fall. This isn't a scholastic book, but it could be. Helen Griffith's Moshi Cat. Now, this is about a black and white cat, Socks. Can you hear? Listen to this. It was not even a perfect black face, for there was a white splash over his eye, and both his cheeks were white. In the middle of all this whiteness, he had a black chin, so that he really was the most higgledy-piggledy of black and white cats. This, of course, was Moshi Cat. This is Helen Griffiths, who I don't know, I don't think. And it was a Piccolo book, which was an imprint from Pan Books. in the 70s especially. This is 73 this was out. Piccolo I've got a lot of fondness for. It's got, the logo is, I don't know if you can see in the light, is Mr. Tumnus. It's a pan dancing about. Of course, pan books, Piccolo. I think I've just realised that after 50 years. Anyway, and a puffin called Robin by Catherine Storr. Catherine Storr was a wonderful writer, of course, who wrote Marianne Dreams. Was that her? I'm not sure. This is illustrated by Peggy Fortnum, who did the original Paddington illustrations, which makes this worth buying just for that. These are all very gentle kids' books. You know, they're not the splashiest, flashiest kids' books. They're kind of about animals and feelings and families. All the things I would have liked to read as a kid. Davy's Wee Dog by William McKellar. It's all about people being separated from their animals, which would have killed me to read about. Yeah, like me and my dog. Operation Sipperchick, Rumour Godden. This is published by Carousel, which was an imprint of, I think, maybe Lions? Transworld. I should look into what else they published, because that logo is very, very familiar. There's a Blue Peter book of silly poems, which you always get a few that you don't kind of particularly want or need in one of these batches. But at the same time, it's illustrated by Peter Firmin, who did some wonderful books. He did the Basil Brush book that I just talked about, and he did a series about Fox and Mole, which I've got somewhere that I'll show you at some point. Right, what else? Oh, I'm going to sneeze because of the dust. Oh God, this is awful. I'm sneezing on YouTube. Shadrach by Mindet de Jong. And oh God, this is terrible. Davy had waited. I read the back of this the other night. It just sounds heartbreaking. Davy had waited. He'd waited a whole week for Shadrach to come, and it seemed like forever, but now his little black rabbit was there. He lived at grandfather's in the hutch that Davy's father had built. Davy looked after Shadrach every minute he could and dreamed about him the rest of the time. Then he began to worry about his little black rabbit, for Shadrach was growing thinner and thinner, and one day Davy arrived to discover Shadrach had gone. How was Davy ever going to find him? It sounds terrible. And a Gerald Durrell kids book, one about code writing. Again, not the things I was primarily after. It was really these kinds of things. King of the Grizzlies. Another scholastic book about animals. This is one about a little bear whose mother is shot, his siblings are shot, everybody's dead. He grows up and he goes demented and goes on a rampage and eats everybody. It's a Disney film, apparently. Sorry. The dust is terrible. That Dog Tar by Nan Hayden Agel, or Agel. A dog about a black Labrador. Stolen Pony by Glenn Rounds. It's about a blind pony. I've just picked a pile of books about the most unfortunate animals in the world. The rabbit that gets thinner and thinner and finally disappears. The blind pony. Locked in the swaying trunk, the blind little pony snorts with terror. Horse thieves captured him in the dead of night, and now he's being carried farther and farther from home. What will happen when the thieves find out he is blind? Will they turn him loose? But how can a blind pony find his way home? I'm making them all sound sentimental and terrible, but of course, scholastic books were always beautifully written. That was the point. They were reliably well done well-written books. And then 2 volumes in Young Puffins of Mrs. Pepperpot, which I haven't read since the time. Jeremy read Mrs. Pepperpot. We were talking about it the other night, and they were fantastic books. Are they Swedish? I think they're Swedish. Somebody will tell me if I'm wrong. They're either Swedish or Danish. And then the final thing is one that I had when I was 8 years old. This slightly homoerotic cover to a Greek Legends retelling by Olivia E. Coolidge, Hercules and Other Tales from Greek Myths. I can picture myself sitting reading this at the age of 8 or 9 in our L-shaped living room in Aycliffe, in Arncliffe Place, and being enthralled. We had various myths told to us or read to us or described to us at school, and I'd watched Ray Harryhausen movies and all sorts of things. I'd watched Doctor Who, that sometimes retold Greek myths in science fiction drag. And this was the first time I sat down by myself and read these stories told as myths. So it's Hercules, there's The Boy Who Flew Too High, Icarus, and The Adventures of Theseus. And they're just short enough. Again, the kind of very good judgment of Scholastic and the way they made books, knowing that attention span is a very kind of delicate thing and it needs to be pushed with each read. You need to get readers to extend their reading stamina all through their lives, actually, because it can go back. Your reading stamina can change over time, and you need different kinds of books at different times. People beat themselves up with thinking they should be reading this or that, or challenging themselves, or reading longer books, or reading books more quickly, and of course none of that's true. And if you'd been taught very carefully, like I think I was, thinking back, through things like the Scholastic Book Club, you recognise and you realise that sometimes you just need shorter, simpler things to read, or other times you need something a bit more to get your teeth into. Very interesting how that works, I think. Yesterday we had a day out in Bolton and scooted about some of the kind of charity shops. Mostly we went to the museum and art gallery, seeing local art, seeing the aquarium, the Egyptian exhibit. It was all good fun. It was worth a visit. In the shops, I found a first edition of Mike Harding's When the Martians Landed in Huddersfield, his book of daftness and cartoons and poems or comedy bits, fake letters. He's a northern comedian and musician who I kind of know because I haven't seen for years and years. We once judged a literary prize together, the Portico Prize, in 2008. And this is a signed first edition with a cartoon in. So that was a good find. This is from 1984. Nice condition. I don't think it's a first edition. I think it's third edition from the first year. He did really well. This is a first edition. This was £1 from a charity shop. Heart-shaped box by Joe Hill from, I think, 2007. Stephen King's son's first novel. I remember being at the British Fantasy Convention in 2006, and all the talk was of Joe Hill. And people were kind of trying to get his stories for their magazines and their anthologies. He was the flavour of the month. And of course, with the connections he had, the name he had, he couldn't do wrong. But apparently he's fantastic anyway, which is good to hear. When Judas Coyne heard someone was selling a ghost on the internet, there was no question what he was going to do. It was perfect for his collection of the macabre and the grotesque. The Cannibal's Cookbook, The Witch's Confession, the authentic snuff movie. As an aging death metal rock god, buying a ghost almost qualifies as a business expense. I've got another of his books that I've waited. It's been hanging around for years for me to read. So I will start on him next time I want to read something properly spooky, a contemporary spooky horror novel. I'm running out of time, really. It's 25 minutes already of me blethering and the cat singing on my lap. Can you hear him? When he's content, I've said this before, he sings in the sun. I'm going to move that again so they can see you. Finally, a parcel came this morning from my friend Jenny Shirt, who was round on Saturday when we had a whole bunch of people sitting in the garden and eating on Saturday afternoon and chatting. And at some point, I must have mentioned Star Trek books. I must have been going on about amassing my collection of James Blish books and rebuying one or two volumes that I'd lost over the years or had been, gone missing over the years. And I must have mentioned that the one that I'd never had was J.A. Lawrence's Mud's Angels. J.A. Lawrence was James Blish's wife, and he died halfway through writing the final Star Trek novelization of the original show, Star Trek 12. And it always stuck with me, the introduction he wrote to the book, welcoming everyone to the last volume, and then another introduction by his wife saying he died before the book could be completed, so she'd finished it and planned to carry on. She planned to adapt the two remaining episodes, the two Harry Mudd stories. And for some reason, I'd never come across it, or I'd never picked it up. And this is a copy from the time. This is 78. It's a first edition paperback that I've now got. Jenny went home and went straight online, I guess, and ordered me a copy of this with this beautiful 70s cover, Mud's Angels. So that's my collection of 70s Star Trek complete. I think there's a few kind of original novels that I haven't got, or I used to have, maybe one or two I missed. But in terms of that original batch of Star Trek 1 to 8, and then Spock Must Die, the original novel by James Blish, and now this, that kind of first 5-year mission is complete, with as well the 10 volumes of Alan Dean Foster's Star Trek logs, which adapt the wonderful animated show. So much nostalgia and so much love for these stories. When I reread Star Trek 5 last week or the week before, after a gap of 40 years, I was amazed at the way Blish made these stories book-worthy in a very particular way. He, I think I said at the time, he makes them bounce. All the extraneous bits drop off, and the story that's left is almost fabular in its nature. They each read like fairy tales almost, taking on different aspects of magic. I mean, we call it science fiction, it's dressed up as science fiction, but these are magical stories, really. They go to a planet where the oldest being in the universe has created a perfect woman to be his daughter that he protects. That's a fairy tale story as much as it is science fiction. And each of them you can reduce to one line, and that becomes the kernel of the story. I think that's the mark of a story that bounces. You can boil it down to one line and make people want to read it. That's my bit of wisdom for the day. And that is my heap of books that have come my way in recent days. I'm very lucky. And I'm lucky to be sitting in the sun and looking at an afternoon of finishing that book and moving on to the next thing from my book bag. I do hope, oh, he's stretching. I do hope everyone's well. Say goodbye, Socky. I hope everyone's well, and I hope to see you all again quite soon. Goodbye.